This slide series is done in memory of Dr. Edward Ross Ritvo, who passed away in June of 2020 at the age of 90 years. A pioneer in autism research, he led the field in establishing that autism was neurobiologically based. A graduate of Harvard and a U.S. Army veteran, he spent his entire academic professional career at UCLA. His work included studies of diagnosis and classification, genetics and epidemiology, as well as neurobiology and psychopharmacology. He trained generations of leaders in the field and is survived by family members and many, many students. It's an honor to dedicate this series of talks to his memory with the support of Dr. Ariella Riva Ritvo Slifka and the Alan B. Slifka Foundation.
Welcome. I'm Deborah Puglia. I'm a member of the Center of Excellence on Autism Spectrum Disorders at Southern Connecticut State University in New Haven, Connecticut. Today's topic will be visual strategies and supports for students with autism spectrum disorders. I would like to note that today's presentation is part of a series of videos that our team at the center has developed. Our objectives for today's session will be to explain the importance of using visual supports with students on the autism spectrum. We will identify how to use visual supports for our students, and we will learn how to demonstrate how to effectively design effective visual supports. The following 3 slides contain terminology that I will be using throughout this presentation, and they are here for your reference. First of all, we have to talk about visual supports providing a way to present information that may help some students have greater success. These can include materials that display sequences, expectations, and outcomes that can help our students be more successful both in the home and school environment. We're also going to talk about prompting. Types of visual supports. The one pictured here is a simple sequence of activities and then signals to the student that they are done. Visual supports can contain written words, pictures, gestures, objects in the environment, and also the physical arrangement of the environment. And I will have examples of all of these. Individuals on the autism spectrum have both challenges and strengths. They have challenges in the area of theory of mind, which is perspective taking, central coherence, which is seeing the bigger picture, and executive functioning, which is organization and planning skills. Their strengths are that they are visual learners. They have a strong visual recall. They adhere to routines and schedules very nicely. And they are concrete learners. Abstract concepts often cause them challenge. Why should we use visual supports? Visual supports can clarify language. They can persist over time. They can display temporal arrangements, and they can help students know what expectations we have for them. Also, they can highlight consequences, increase motivation. They are portable, flexible, and they can easily be integrated into the regular curriculum. The use of technology now is very often used in schools, and our students can use the technology as well as their peers. Any or all of these areas can have visual supports to support them: academic, communication, social interaction, and behavior. And again, I'm going to share with you some examples of visual supports that address complex routines, task completion, increase interactions of our students with both their peers and adults, give them some guidance in terms of appropriate behavior, and also help them with transitions. We must consider prerequisite skills, which are the skills that a student brings to the table. We then, once we know the prerequisite skills, we can then design the visual supports that will help the students. For instance, in matching, are they able to match photos to objects, pictures to objects, words to objects? What are their skills in terms of following instructions? Pictured there is the PECS communication system, Picture Exchange Communication System, which uses pictures. Always be sure that the student understands the meaning of the picture. Obviously, that will enhance communication. Oftentimes, educators choose to use a photo of the student actually engaging in the activity. Common types of visual supports can be one sheet, graphic organizers. Visual supports can be posted on walls and desks. We're going to take a look at an example of that in a little while. Some supplemental visual stimuli, and obviously technology. Here is an example of work bins that are organized with classroom materials. Each child's name is on a bin. This helps them with that organization and planning, the executive functioning that I mentioned earlier. And even though it seems simple, it is quite effective with our students. The next is a visual support. Many of our students are very reluctant writers, and the organization of their thoughts is difficult for them. So this structure gives them really a nice visual outline of what is expected in this writing task. They need a topic sentence, 3 detail sentences, and a conclusion. This is an example of an environmental visual support, and again, seems simple, but classroom organization really helps our students with peer and adult interaction, transitioning from activity to activity. For instance, in this labeled picture we have an individual work area, a quiet area, and a small group area. And I'll be referring to some of these areas as I talk about specific visual supports as we proceed. Sharing information. Communication is often difficult for our students, and sometimes they want to focus on one particular aspect of their school day. They have difficulty sometimes putting their thoughts in order or sequencing what they did during the course of the school day. So a visual support such as this helps them. This is something that is very effectively used when shared with home, because oftentimes parents will say, well, he or she won't tell me what they did in school today. I really would like to know. So this can be an effective tool to use to increase that social communication. Sharing information again. We know that our students can be either hypo or hyper sensitive to pain. And this particular visual support helps them to identify and again communicate what is hurting them, what is bothering them. It can be used in the school setting with the school nurse, also at home. A parent might want to use this when the child goes to the doctor or in an emergency situation. And at the center, our team developed a training for first responders. And this particular visual is one that we share with those first responders and encourage them to have in their toolbox when they do go on a call and they might encounter an individual who has difficulty telling them what hurts. Another visual for sharing information, and again, think back to those prerequisite skills. This obviously, with all of the vocabulary, would be appropriate for a student with, advanced language skills. Again, it's important they know the definition of those words and are able, again, to identify their feelings and communicate those in written form. I've also included the incredible 5-point scale. Carrie Dunn Barron is the author of this, and I have seen this used very effectively with children of all ages, but especially younger children, where they can identify how they're feeling, they can look at the facial expression and the level of the emotion that they are experiencing. Green being number 1, okay, it's low on the scale, I'm feeling okay, I'm in control. 5 being, I'm very anxious, I'm very frustrated, I need some help. Taking turns. This simple visual can be even put on the corner of a student's desk, reminding them to take turns. Students on the spectrum often have difficulty with turn taking in social conversations as well as in game playing. So again, this simple visual would be very helpful in that realm for them. Choice making, so very important for our students. Choice making encourages them to feel independent, be able to make decisions, which are, of course, lifelong skills. This is a very simple choice-making visual, crayons or markers. Some educators with very young children might choose to use actual crayons or actual markers. For older students, you might provide them with a choice wheel, which has more than 2 choices on it. Always, again, going back to those prerequisite skills, make sure that you know your student. You don't want to overwhelm them with too many choices. Schedules, very important. Again, they look very simple, but in my experience in classrooms with students with ASD, schedules at all levels, I think, are extremely effective. Here is a pocket type of schedule, the sequence of the day's activities. In those pockets might be the instructional materials that the student will need. Perhaps for the shop class, there might be a simple rundown, a visual of the safety rules that the student has to follow in that shop class. Another example of a schedule, the AM and PM. I used something similar with a younger student who was very fixated on when the bus would be coming during the school day to pick him up to go home. Clearly, using this with him enabled him to see after morning's activities, after the afternoon activities, indeed the bus would be coming. Oftentimes we use Velcro on the back of these little activity cards. They can be moved and adjusted as needed. Sometimes the student is very motivated and likes to take the activity off once it's completed. Task transition. It can be a challenge for our students to move from one task to another. The first then visual is based on the PREMAC principle. First, we do our homework, then we can watch TV. First, we wash our hands, then we get to eat our delicious snack. The first is always the less desirable, or perhaps the required task. The then always must be highly desirable and motivational. Otherwise, this PREMAC principle will not work. So it wouldn't be do your chores and then help dad outside in the yard. If the student doesn't really want to help dad outside in the yard, if that's not motivating, make it something, a video game, reading, playing with their toys, whatever. Task analysis is simply breaking down a larger task into smaller pieces. Here is a visual of washing hands. It's 5 steps, and again, you would consider the prerequisite skills of the student you are designing this for. If they have language, you might want to just use the words or just the pictures. Or if they need to, perhaps a picture of them actually engaging in each of these activities. This can easily be put near a sink where the task would be done. Also useful to share with home. Visualizing time. We talked about abstract concepts being sometimes challenging for students on the autism spectrum. So this is an example of a time timer, and it shows elapsed time. There are many other types of timers that can be used. Some students like to use their own watch with a timer, or if it's permitted in their school setting, a cell phone with the time component on it. This helps them to make that, to visualize time and make a abstract concept a lot more concrete. Again, I have to emphasize the prerequisite skills. For many students, oftentimes the timer raises their anxiety and can be distracting. So in that case, obviously, this would not be a good visual to use with that particular student. Classroom expectations. Again, our students respond to visuals much more than they do to auditory directions. And oftentimes we hear a lot of auditory. Sit in your chair, be quiet, raise your hand, look at the person who's speaking with you. And that really doesn't process and stay with the student as well as a visual such as this. Again, this simple card could be put on the corner of the student's desk, just so that that would clarify the behavioral expectation. Also, a visual can highlight consequences. This is similar to the first then, but it involves some choice, which is a great component for our students. Do your chores, and then once your chores are completed, you're going to get to either ride your bike, watch TV, talk on the phone to a friend, play with the computer. So again, it lets the student know once one task is complete, I will be able to do something preferable. This is just a visual of the steps truly for eating in acceptable manner. And we know that our students are rule followers. They like to follow rules, enforce rules with others sometimes. Again, this would be appropriate for a student with language skills. You might need to use just pictures with a student that didn't have this ability to decode and understand this vocabulary. Relaxation. Think back to the visual of the environment and the classroom setup with the work area, the small group area, and the quiet area. These would be visuals that you could post in that quiet area. We all know our students often just need time to relax a little bit, take a breath, move a little bit, and these are examples of different visuals for relaxation. Again, you would ensure that the student understood the words, the pictures, and clearly had practiced these before having the student do them on their own. And I should point out, with this and many of the visuals that I have been sharing, they are appropriate for all students, not just for our students on the autism spectrum. And this one in particular, I think, would also be good for the teachers and adults that work with the students. So how do we design visual supports? We set our goal, and all students have an individualized education plan if they receive special education services. That's called an IEP. And there are goals and objectives in that IEP. So most likely you would be designing visual supports around one of those goals and its objectives. So you determine your goal. Maybe it's washing hands independently. Consider the prerequisite skills. Does the student have the fine motor skills to do some of the parts of the task analysis of washing their hands? Make a plan. Think about even the person that's going to implement this. Where is it going to take place? Gather the needed materials that you need to implement this visual, and then implement the visual and monitor it for success. And let the student get feedback from the student. What's working for him or her and what's not. And then finally, fade the support. Once you feel that the visual or parts of it can be taken away or it can be simplified, certainly you want to do that. The goal with any of these visual supports is to lead our students to independence. As a wrap-up to today's presentation, I just would like you to reflect for a while on how you would plan to use the visual supports we've talked about today with the students that you work with. Thank you very much for listening. I would encourage you to visit our center's website. We have provided the website for you. And the following slides are references that you can refer to for more information on this topic of visual supports and strategies. Thank you again.